Hey guys, today we are joined by Dan Macri. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Excellent. Now, Dan is a strongman. He's a strongman coach. He's a strength coach. Um, Aside from that, and for people who don't know you, Dan, give me a bit of a basic overview of your background as an athlete and also as a coach.
Started powerlifting when I was 15. My first comp was actually on my 15th birthday. Walked into it sort of just having been told by a trainer at my gym, be something good for you to try, and walked out with a couple of national records.
Nice one.
With, without even realizing that they were there to be taken. Continued powerlifting for a few years till at one stage my dad showed us a strongman competition on TV, and I just thought, that looks awesome. You know, you get to run around with heavy stuff and the flipping cars and all sorts of crazy stuff. So wanted to give that a shot. Eventually started getting myself together some strongman gear and, just continued on with strongman from there. Won WA Strongest Man 5 times. Competed Australia's Strongest Man 4 times, second twice. Competed at the first ever Australian Arnold Classic as a professional and got 8th in that comp and then 3rd in the Southern Hemisphere. So a couple of reasonable.
I like it. And what sort of coaching experience? I mean, I know you've worked with athletes from a lot of different backgrounds. Talk me through what you've done in that sort of area.
Look, most of my coaching has all been either powerlifting or strongman. I've in terms of coaching strongman athletes, actually been better at coaching than what I've been competing myself. So I've coached 4 people to national championships across different weight categories and obviously different genders as well. So had some reasonable success there. So
cool.
It's all been fun.
It's sometimes a fine balance or a hard balance to find when a lot of people who are naturally good athletes, which obviously you were, being able to walk in off the street effectively and take some national records. A lot of these people who have this high natural ability sometimes find it hard to articulate how to do things because it works so naturally for them. But it's definitely an asset where you can both teach it and have that natural ability as well, which is cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Talk about the sport of strongman. So give people a basic overview of how this sport actually works.
All right. This is a conversation I actually had with a few people recently. Effectively, CrossFit and strongman are the same sports. You're just changing up the percentages and the duration.
I like it.
The way I put it is strongman is 90% plus and you're not going for any longer than 90 seconds. CrossFit's sort of your 60% and you're going... You guys go way too long. I don't even know.
Yeah, nice.
Anything over 5 minutes and I'm done.
Yeah.
But it's the same basic principles. So it's moving load or moving a maximal load, and you've got that time limit to move it in. Obviously, it's the exact specific implements change slightly. Where you guys might be using a barbell, say for clean and jerks or clean and presses, we'll use a log or an axle. Where you guys are doing, unweighted runs or, occasionally guys are doing carries, we'll always be doing a heavy carry of some kind, whether it's a yoke or farmers or, or a car walk or something like that. It's same basic principles, just you're changing up a few of the variables.
Yeah, cool. So obviously there is a decent overlap there, particularly, as you say, at that top end of strength or bottom end of time domain. How do you think strongman training would integrate well into CrossFit?
Look, it's I think 2 things. One, it's a variation. And as I know with any athlete, including myself as well, no matter how good a training program is on paper, you can start to get bored of it. And the best program, as one of my favorite professors told me at uni, isn't the best program on paper. It's the program that the athlete's going to do. So 100% compliance beats anything. You always want 100% in your athlete. So first thing I say is it's very similar movements, but they have high crossover. And sometimes, hey, look, if you've been cleaning and jerking a barbell for the last, 6 months, someone giving you a fat bar to play around with for a couple of sessions, probably going to seem like a bit of fun, even though it's a really small change and the loading is going to be slightly different. Like you said, it's sort of overload. So it's another way to get in your maximal effort work, but rather than being as static as what powerlifting is, which there is always a place for that. I've got, been involved in powerlifting for a long time and still do a lot of powerlifting training. It's a way to get some maximal load in dynamic movements as well. So, yeah, just a few extra variables to add into anyone's training.
Yeah, I think this value of fun and this value of novelty is sometimes it's given less importance than it should. And obviously from just a pure physical point of view, as you say, a program on paper, from a pure physical point of view, this stuff is beneficial, but it extends a lot beyond that to keeping people fresh and obviously teaching that adaptability, but also teaching them a little bit of novelty in their training to keep them going, hey?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One person I thought put it really well was I was seeing an old interview from John Wellborn, who I believe competed at the first CrossFit Games.
Yeah,
and
2008, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, did terrible in everything except for the deadlift event at the end, which he cleaned up in pretty well.
Yeah.
But I can never remember the name of the guy that was talking with him in the interview, but it was the guy from Starting Strength. And they were talking a lot about Olympic lifting in the NFL. And he brought up, once again, the compliance, and two, he just brought up the whole skill acquisition thing. So it was like, well, why would you try and get someone in the NFL to spend 6 months trying to be really proficient at an Olympic lift when they can get the exact same benefits of the Olympic lifts doing something much simpler and something they're much likely to comply to? Because you tell these guys that have got 1,000 other things to learn, hey, spend 6 months learning this lift before you can actually start really improving at what's going to make you money. They're not going to listen. They're going to find something to do.
I know you've spent a bit of time around some CrossFit athletes, sort of coaching them specifically in some strongman work. What do you see as the biggest thing that a CrossFit athlete in general would neglect? Like, is there something that you sort of look at them and say, hey, come on, you guys really need to be doing more of? Fill in the blank.
One, rest. A lot of the CrossFit athletes that I've worked with, look, you guys have such awesome motors that you forget that sometimes just because you can keep going doesn't always mean that you should.
Yeah, good one.
And that's twofold there. One, rest in a training session. So, even though you might not feel you need to take 3 minutes in between sets, you're going to get a better result in the long run if you take 3 minutes or 5 minutes in between sets rather than 20 seconds, and rest in between sessions. A few of the CrossFitters that I have worked with, that they have a feeling or a need they need to do something every day, as a going, hey, look, I've worked hard for the last 3 days, probably should have a day where I do nothing today. The second thing that I think CrossFitters do miss out on a little bit is that maximal level, that maximal strength. So maximal strength is a component of speed, and especially if you're doing anything, for repetitions. I mean, easy example. I mean, you look at someone like say let's take Klokov for example. Very proficient, very strong Olympic lifter. You get him to do Grace or Isabel, and it's 25% of his max on those lifts, and he's going to make it look like a joke. Now, of course, he's going to make it look like a joke because it's 25%. You get someone to do something at 25% of the max, of course it's going to be easy. You get some CrossFitters who they've got, a max snatch of, let's say, 100. So they're working at 60% still when they're doing that. Relatively much harder. If they then got their snatch up to, 120 or 140, or generally just increase their overall maximal strength, that particular exercise is going to be much easier. And I feel that ties in hand back with the rest thing, where you always limit what your maximal strength is by limiting your rest and recovery.
Yeah, cool. I think that's really refreshing for you to say those 2 points, because probably your second point would come as no surprise to anyone. I mean, you're the big strong man. It's no surprise that the advice you're going to give is you guys need to get stronger. And that's probably the response that people are expecting who are watching or listening to this. They're expecting you to say you need to be stronger. But what I like was the fact that you put that recovery stuff first, and you're saying, well, it's irrelevant you lifting heavier and trying to get stronger if you're not recovering between sets and not recovering between sessions. I think that's cool.
Oh, look, I appreciate that. And on the flip side as well, I mean, looking at a lot of strongman athletes moving forward, and if I could have a lot of my time over again, I'll do a lot more conditioning and have myself a lot more generally prepared, because the conditioning does tie in back to the recovery as well. The better condition you are, the better you can recover. So I think, strength athletes have a lot to learn from CrossFitters,
Yeah.
just like CrossFitters have a lot to learn from strength athletes. I mean, I think we all got to remember a little bit. We're all, although it's not the exact same goal that we've got in the end, we're all kind of in the same club together here. And I think
Yeah.
there's things we can all learn off each other.
So how do you think we do that? Because obviously there is a little bit of my training methodology is better than yours. And is there a way that we can bring that down? I mean, things like this, sort of talking with people of different disciplines, but how can we best learn from each other and put our egos to the side?
I mean, look, I think the first thing is we have to realize that everyone has something valuable to offer, right? And you also have to realize that just because someone's not doing the exact same thing as you doesn't mean what they're doing or the advice they give is worthless. Sometimes a fresh perspective from someone from the outside looking in can help you out a lot more than, someone that does your sport day in, day out, because sometimes it's not seeing the forest from the trees. I mean, the biggest thing I've never gotten is why people want to try and compare sports. Who's better, the CrossFitter or the powerlifter or the strongman or the bodybuilder? Well, no one's better. You're all doing different things. I mean, I'm pretty certain there's no one sitting down at the Olympic Village going, who's better, the swimmer or the sprinter? They kind of realize they're doing two different things, but they're both there to, enjoy each other's achievements together. I mean, it sort of boggles me a little bit sometimes when, people from both sides of the fence, and I honestly probably feel sometimes more from strength sports than from the CrossFit side, want to sit there and kind of, talk negatively about the other one. Just like with anything, there's good and bad coaches, and I think it's fantastic to see there's some great coaches like yourself doing a much more, comprehensive approach to the sport, as opposed to, look, and I've seen plenty of strength coaches as well, I think do an absolutely terrible job as well. So everything goes hand in hand. I think take time to listen to everyone's advice and possibly explore avenues, because the honest truth is, if someone who's never seen you do your sport can see a weakness in you, probably exists.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. I like it. Let's change direction a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more practical. So you've talked about how it's important to recover, and this fact that a lot of CrossFitters have this mentality that more is better. And I'm a big believer that to create an efficient program for someone, it's not about seeing how much you can fit in before they break. It's about seeing how much you can take away from that program before they stop getting benefit. So it would be easy to say, yes, we need to include more strongman training in CrossFit. But a CrossFitter's mentality would then be to say, I'm going to keep doing everything else that I was doing and add strongman on top of that, which of course is the exact opposite of what you're advising. So in your opinion, how can a CrossFitter implement more strongman into their training without just adding more on top of more?
I mean, look, if I was given this task specifically, one, I'd want to see what their training is specifically to begin with, and sort of obviously assess their weaknesses and see where I think the different implements can work in. I think variation is probably the first thing. Occasionally when someone, work some sort of a rotation on a day when someone might have squats, rotate out squats for one session, chuck in something like a heavy yoke. So working similar muscle groups, but different loading patterns. It's more time under tension. You're getting a bit more of a cardio benefit there as well. I wouldn't necessarily want to just be, like you said, adding things on top. I mean, you could eventually potentially work to that point over time, but right from the beginning, I just feel it'd be too much overload. And then, I mean, even on the conditioning aspect, look, there's so many different strongman implements out there, as you've seen. Set up some longer medleys and kind of, like I said, change the percentages a little bit rather than doing it at 90% in 60 seconds. Bring it to somewhere more in that midpoint, sort of bring it back down to say a 75% and increase the time out to 3-4 minutes, use the implement in some more creative ways to get a bit more cross training happening.
Yeah. I think, and from what I hear you saying is we don't actually need to change training a lot. I mean, you can have a session or a workout that you're intending to do in your programming, and you can just put a strongman flavor on that by using an axle instead of using a bar, and by using a yoke instead of doing heavy deadlifts. And you start to get the same sort of stimulus, but a lot more adaptability as well.
100%. I mean, initially with myself, that's actually what I did with my own training. I think that's probably been my favorite way to train in the past. I sort of, traditional powerlifting sort of program is, a squat day, a bench day, and a deadlift day. When I sort of first started working strongman in, my squat day became, squat heavy 1 week, light yoke the next week, and pretty much that was all I did for assistance work. Rotate the week after. Same deal with log and bench, or axle and bench, and then same deal with deadlift and farmers. Then over time, as I sort of built up a bit more training resistance, added in a fourth day where I sort of chucked in more of the conditioning or, exotic sort of strongman events like your stones and your medleys and, truck pulls, that sort of stuff like that. And yeah, that's, I guess, how I sort of adapted my programming from there.
Perfect. Yep. I know you've competed at the top level in Arnold's and stuff and Australia's Strongest Man. So you've spent a lot of time around top level strength athletes, top level strongmen. Is there a general habit or a characteristic that you see of strongmen that a CrossFitter should share? So is there something that strongmen do really well? And maybe you've already answered this, but is there something that strongmen do really well that you think CrossFitters could learn from?
The biggest thing I've actually ever noticed at any of the strongman comps that I did was actually at that Arnold's in 2015, and watching Brian Shaw before he competed, and he was just so meticulous with everything. I mean, but before each event, he would spend twice as much time realistically just examining the implement, sort of going, all right, so, and just feeling it out as much as possible, just being as meticulous as possible about everything. And sort of, most people, say setting the height on the car walk we had that year would go, yep, I get enough clearance with this height, I'm done, that's the end of it. He spent more time than anyone else, fluffing around with 4 or 5 different positions before he found the one that he liked the most. And just the taking that extra bit of time to sort of think about everything you do before you actually do it and go, why am I doing this? Is this the best way to do it? Have I got the best grip? Have I got the best foot position? Just taking that time to, I guess, maximize your efficiency rather than going, well, I can pull this deadlift with my feet position here, so I'm just going to do it anyway. Even if I expend, 5% extra energy, how can I actually make this more efficient? How can I make this look better? What's going to be the best way to do this?
It's basically professional, isn't it? Basically, it's how professional he is with his approach, and I think 100%. I think probably the top level CrossFitters do that at the CrossFit Games sort of level, but at a grassroots level where people are just going in and doing their daily training, they're probably not thinking about their strategy or their pacing or their plan A, B, C until the clock starts. And sometimes just taking a bit of time to say, okay, what's the plan going in? I think is going to count for a lot.
I think so, and I mean, I think it's habits that everyone should start building. I mean, look, easy ones to kind of throw some similarities up between here is, say, a log press for reps and something like, Grace or Isabel. You've got a time limit versus a maximum amount of reps, but you want to sort of, I guess, with something like those barbell wads, you want to, I guess, maximize your efficiency. Now, if you can get 30 unbroken, well, different sort of situation there. Yeah. When you're not quite at that point, maybe you can get 8, but is it most efficient to get 8? Maybe you're better off getting 6 and then another 6 and another 6 and stacking them up like that, as opposed to getting 8, being gassed for 30 seconds and then doing it in groups of 4 or 5.
Yeah. Let's turn practical again. Let's say that someone's watching this and you've now been able to convince them that, okay, yes, I should be doing more strongman training as part of my CrossFit training. And they say, right, on Monday, I'm going to start to include this. What do you think is the smallest thing that they could start to include to start to make a big difference? So I'm not talking about big wholesale changes and suddenly becoming a strongman athlete, but is there a really, really, really tiny little thing that they could do to start this path?
Yeah, like I said, find some way to vary up something you're already doing. I mean, even if it's not specifically, switching out your squats for a yoke, because I mean, I know not everyone has access to, to a yoke sitting around. Do some kind of similar variation. Walk out a heavy squat, hold it for 30 seconds. Find a different way to get some load through what you're doing. That even if it's not specifically, a strongman implement, just something different. If you've never squatted with chains, try squatting with chains. Just vary things up a little bit. Find, a variation, look at your workout for the week, pick one exercise, from each of those workouts and keep the same basic movement there, but just chuck a little variation on it.
Perfect. Cool. I know a lot of the research into habit formation and trying to create behavior change with people talks about the fact that we can't actually delete a habit, we can just change it. So sometimes trying to introduce a new habit can be really difficult because you have a lot of resistance to starting. But if someone's already doing the training, they're already spending the time, they're already doing those reps, it's going to be easy just to change and tweak that habit a little bit, to change and tweak that behavior rather than, as you say, introducing a whole new element of training. So I think that's really good advice.
Oh, easy. And it's sometimes it's things that just you think in your head won't make any difference, but you soon sort of realize they do. If your back's hurting, while you're deadlifting, look, put your deadlift on a centimeter mat. It seems like it's no real difference, but sometimes that tiny bit of, extra height you're lifting from, it's not enough to actually negatively impact your deadlift off the floor, but it's going to save you back a little bit.
Cool.
You find you're struggling strength-wise off the floor, stand on a centimeter mat or a small piece of wood or something just to lift you just that tiny bit off the floor. It doesn't even have to be, and I see most people jumping straight to going, off a plate. You don't need that drastic of a change to create a different stimulus.
Cool.
Things can be, it's same principles as progressive overload.
Yeah.
If you're squatting 100 this week, you're probably not programming your next session to be 140. It's probably going to be 105, maybe 110. Do things nice and slow, steady, continual change, and you'll get a much better result in the long run.
Cool. I know you've been involved in organising a local strongman comps and stuff. What I would like to know is if you were programming an event for the CrossFit Games, so you had the people who are claiming to be the 50 fittest people on the planet across broad areas, and you wanted to test them using your areas of specialisation in strongman. If you were going to write an event for the CrossFit Games, what would that look like?
Look, what I'd probably want to do is grab, I guess, the most sort of classical or almost iconic sort of disciplines from strongman and sort of, run them all as one sort of big medley. So, I guess a yoke walk into a deadlift, into a farmer's walk, into some kind of a pressing medley, which we'll probably want to test all the different implements to press. So say, a log, an axle, a dumbbell, probably some kind of an odd object, and then into, a carry and load with, say, sandbags, kegs, farmer's stones, sort of test out every aspect that we could. And obviously, because it is CrossFit, you're making sure you're testing fitness as well. Make it one sort of big, long, continuous, race, like something that's going to last a good, 10 to 15 minutes to get all these guys to get it through.
Yeah, cool. Sounds horrible. Now, we're, of course, lucky enough to have you as one of our subject matter expert coaches at our athlete camp that we've got coming up September 2018. You're obviously are going to be running the Strongman module on this. What can people expect from this event for you, and what are they going to take away? What are CrossFitters going to take away from the time that is spent with you?
Well, look, what I really want to do is go through some of those sort of, core, events there in Strongman, being the yoke, the farmers. I'll bring in a few implements for everyone to press, and then go through some loading as well, and just sort of talk about how, one, I feel, what athletic attributes or muscle groups these different events are going to help work on, and two, just like we sort of discussed briefly, how you can implement these into your training or rotate, out, say, cleans 1 week to chuck stone lifts in instead, and you're still working the same attribute, but you get to, like we said, one, have a bit of fun doing something different, and, two, just change up those variables slightly.
Perfect. I can't wait. I think it's going to be really valuable having you there. I think having your perspective and experience and just basically opening up people's eyes to a different sport and a different way of implementing it, I think it's going to be really cool. It's going to be good.
Oh, I cannot wait. I think it's going to be great.
It should be good. Anything that we haven't touched on, Dan, that you'd like to go over before we say goodbye?
No, look, I think we've covered everything pretty well. I mean, don't want to give everything away before the actual.
That's it.
Something like that.
You got it.
Yeah, look, it's been great, and as I said, I think like I did say, just to reiterate it again, everyone's got something to offer. So let's, as a as a as a community of let's all get along with each other a bit more, whether we're bodybuilders or strength athletes or CrossFitters. We've all got something we can all learn from each other. You look at a bodybuilder and you kind of think, hey, maybe I could clean up my diet a bit more. You look at a strength athlete, you think, hey, maybe I should do a bit more maximal effort work. And then you look at a CrossFit and you're like, you know what, it's probably going to be beneficial if I was a bit more conditioned. So taking an aspect from everyone, look at what everyone's doing, and everyone's got positive things to add. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway. If people want to get in touch with you, Dan, if they've got any questions or if they want to follow you on social media, what are the best ways to follow you, to get in touch with you?
Look, I'm pretty approachable sort of anywhere. Look, the WA Strongman page is where we promote all of our Strongman events. Our next competition is actually July 21st, so the following Saturday at the Coventry Square in Morley. So if anyone wants to come down and watch that and see what we're doing, everyone's more than welcome to come down. Just search myself up on Facebook or Strongman Dan Macri on Instagram. I'm terrible at posting new content, but I'm always available for if anyone wants to message me and ask me any questions. So.
Great, excellent stuff, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time today to have a chat with us. I really appreciate it, and look forward to doing some work with you at the athlete camp. Thanks again.
Absolute pleasure. I cannot wait.
Thanks, Dan.